give you an idea of not only what my argument is, but how I think about philosophical arguments. So I think about philosophical arguments like moves in a chess game. Okay? So I'm going to present my argument to you like moves in a chess game. Okay? And some of you who are well versed in chess might see or recognize some of the moves that I put up here. So in case you were wondering, this is Benjamin Franklin and Lady Howe playing chess together, and she's actually checkmated him, okay, during this game. Okay. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to introduce some of the pieces. So we have the alternative position, which argues that emotions are not rational. Okay. And we have basically the arguments given by the Oxford English Dictionary, Roydy, and Jesse Prince. And I wanted to actually put different figures for, or pieces for Amelie and Jesse, but then the whole chess game thing wouldn't work out right, so I had to make them pawns. Sorry, Amelie and Jesse, but you know, that's life. Okay. So, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it suggests that emotions as an adjective or an adverb characterizes something that uses or is capable of using the faculty of reasoning. It has or having sound judgment. In the extended use, it's noted as being sensible, sane, or lucid. And it is also characterized by reasoning as opposed to emotion, intuition. Okay? So we have here a direct kind of opposition in which emotion is placed on the opposite side of reason. Okay? We also had Amelie a while back ago. I'm not actually sure if she still thinks this, but she said that emotions are not rational, emotions are not as such rational or irrational, nor are specific emotion types as such rational or irrational. Rather, a person can, in a particular situation, be rational or irrational in being frightened, grieving, jealous, just as he can be rational or irrational in what he wants or he does, what he does. So basically, what she's trying to get at is that emotions as a thing in itself, independent of basically individuals, can't be thought of as being rational and irrational, or irrational. Now, I want to suggest that there's something about this that is a bit right, and that is that, this idea that we think that emotions should be thought of as these entities that are outside of the architecture of the human mind or any kind of being's mind or body, and that seems kind of right. But I think there's a way in which we can still say that emotions are rational, okay? Granting this. Thought emotion, that is. Okay? Jesse Prince continues this kind of argument. He states that the normative assessment of an emotion generally arises because of features of its initiation pathways. This point suggests that emotions themselves can never be normatively accessible in their own right. The same point can be made by relocating the question of warrant to a different stage in the process of emotional elicitation. Viewed in this light, emotions are really irrational. So Jesse has kind of this view in which we can say at times that emotions are rational, and what he means by this is we can say that they're appropriate, that they have sufficient warrant, but really because, and this kind of has to do with the quirkiness of the way that Jesse kind of imagines or understands the emotion system to be in relation to the cognitive system, he puts the evaluative kind of appraisal stuff outside of the emotion system. So because of the rationality of emotions actually depends on the appraisal aspect, okay, he can't say that emotions are, strictly speaking, rational. Okay? Okay, so this is what we have in terms of the placement of the initial positions, okay, of the opposing side. Here are my pieces, basically, okay? So I'm going to argue that emotions are rational, and there are several kind of other things to set up, right? First of all, if you notice that looking at the other, okay, where the king is on the opposing side, it's at position H8, okay? So this referred to as core, okay? And then I'm going to make a distinction between this notion of emotion as being rational qua emotion, okay, versus rational in other ways, okay? And the three ways are basically, the three alternatives is instrumental rationality, epistemic rationality, and evaluative rationality. And with evaluative rationality, there's something special about it, okay? And the kind of specialness of evaluative rationality indicates something else. And I'm going to suggest that what it indicates is a way for us to kind of understand how core can be fulfilled, okay? So ultimately, like my last move is basically going to be, after setting up evaluative rationality, taking H8 with my K, okay? Okay. So, core. So this is basically my criterion for the ontological rationality of emotion. Now, you know, people can have all these different kinds of ideas about what rationality is and what do we mean by rationality of emotions. So I want to basically, you know, put everybody on the same page and say, look, this is what we mean by the rationality of emotion qua emotion, okay? Basically, here's what we understand about rationality. It's a capacity for being rational and irrational. Rational is a comparative concept, and rational is a normative concept. Everybody agree? Yes? Sounds good? Yes? Thumbs up? Yep, sounds good? Okay.
Let me understand better. So can you say it again?
So does everybody agree that rationality,
Yes.
okay, is a capacity for being rational and irrational, okay? And that it's a comparative concept, okay? And it's a normative concept, right? Okay, well from this, what I think we can say then is when we talk about emotions being rational qua emotion, okay? Then for every emotion or emotion type, there exists some normative standard given by what emotions are or what an emotion type is, against which our emotional responses can be judged or evaluated in light of the fact that our emotions manifest our rationality. Okay? So if I can fulfill core, okay, then basically I think I've proven that emotions can be rational qua emotion. Okay? And notice that's where the king is. Okay? Okay, whoops. Okay, so first move, okay? I want to make the distinction, okay, between emotions being rational qua emotion and instrumental rationality, epistemic rationality, and evaluative rationality. Okay? So what do I mean by instrumental rationality? The best way in which I can kind of describe it is basically when a lot of people actually talk about the rationality of emotions, they are actually talking about instrumental rationality. So they're talking about emotions as inputs into rational decision making. Okay? So Damasio's research in people with decision making deficits, okay, because they have emotion deficits, these are actually about the rationality of emotion in terms of instrumental rationality. Another example is if you know any of Amos Tversky's and Griffith's work, they talk about decision making, and in terms of assessments of our well-being, there are two types of which like economists, I guess, and rational theorists or rational decision-making theorists talk about, and one type is the choice model, okay, and the other type is the one which they call the model of judgment, okay. I call the choice model basically utility judgments, okay, so these are utility-based judgments, and then the model of satisfaction or well-being basically is what I call emotion-based judgments, okay? So the one kind of experiment which they did, which kind of illustrates the distinction is basically this. They took some undergrads and they, of course, divided them up, right? And they asked one set of undergrads the question, okay, so you're gonna, you know, choose which job you'd rather have, okay? So here are two options. Option A, you can have $35,000, okay? But everybody else who's equally qualified will have $38,000, okay? Or option B, everybody, including yourself, and you're all equally qualified, you all get $33,000. Okay? And then they asked that group this question, which would you rather choose? Okay? Does anyone know the answer?
Yes.
Yes? What's the answer?
I would say the second one. They go for the laughter.
Everybody chooses 33,000. The actual number is that 84% chooses option A,
Oh.
right? So the question is, which would you rather choose? Okay? Then they took the other half of the undergrads and they asked them, okay, which would you be happier at? Guess what they chose? 64% chose B. Okay? So here what we have is the idea of happiness, right? Altering the decision that they're making. Okay? This is what I call an emotion-based decision, okay? Or judgment. Whereas in the other example, right, in the other set, they're talking about choices. And what they're thinking about is maximization of utility, right? In this setup, it's money, right? Whichever one you get the most in terms of money, right? Okay, so this is not about, so notice I'm going to take the castle, and the response here is, well, here's the thing, that's really great, but that's not about the rationality of emotion qua motion, obviously, right? It's about how emotions can play into rational decision making, okay? So, granted, now we can talk about, well, epistemic rationality, okay? In terms of epistemic rationality, we have two notions. One is that of epistemic objectivity and epistemic subjectivity, okay? And when we talk about epistemic objectivity, basically we're talking about emotions being true, okay, or warranted. And this is the kind of typical talk you have when we talk about the rationality of emotions in philosophy of emotions, okay? So we can say that when I experience loss, right? There's something about my loss, the content of that experience, which we can say is true or false. So let's say that, I'm really sad about the fact that, my pet cat died, okay? If that's the case, then we can say, well, is it true or false that my pet cat died, right? And then we can also ask, do I have good reasons? Am I warranted in thinking that my pet cat died? These two questions are about the epistemic objectivity of emotions, okay? We can also ask about the epistemic subjectivity of emotion. And if you're familiar with the philosophical kind of debate between cognitivism and non-cognitivism, the epistemic subjectivity of emotions is typically a criticism that is cast onto non-cognitive theories of emotion. Basically that they are unable to have any kind of informative content, okay, which can be assessed in terms of epistemic objectivity, okay? Well, here's the thing, this all makes sense in terms of rationality, right? But this is not quite, and they go together, so I'm going to just talk about epistemic objectivity, okay? Not quite about the rationality of emotion qua emotion. Why is that? Well, if you think about objectivity, right, epistemic objectivity, the way in which it talks about the irrationality is actually, number one, perceptual accuracy, okay? So not really about emotions, right, because, other perceptions can be true or false, okay, or statements can be true or false, and also warrant, okay? And this is just about, rationality in general, okay? So it's not really special to what emotions are, and so doesn't really fulfill core, okay? Which would be the criticism, okay? So, granted, fine, that sounds good. I totally agree with that, which is why we have to make this distinction. You also then have what we call evaluative rationality, okay? When we talk about evaluative rationality, what there is basically this notion of biographical objectivity and biographical subjectivity, okay? So emotions don't just have these descriptive contents that can be true or false, or content that can be measured in terms of warrant, but it tells us something about our values, okay? It has evaluative content. When we talk about the biographical objective content, okay, it's basically looking at evaluative content in a non-personal way or an impersonal way. Okay? If we were, any kind of objective, like viewer or whatever, knower, what is it that the value of X would be? Okay? But then there's also biographical subjectivity. Okay? And this is very personal. Okay? So when we talk about the biographical subjectivity of emotions, okay, we're talking about basically the way in which that emotion tells me something about my value as the subject who's having the emotional experience. Okay? Now, these two notions of rationality are not necessarily in opposition with each other. Okay? So you can actually have biographical subjectivity, which is rational. Okay? And one way in which, so Chester Calhoun kind of talks about this is with an example of a tomato farmer. Okay? So the tomato farmer has had this farm, and it's been a life work of his. Okay? And he has built the farm with his family, and he needs to now sell it. Okay? So the price that he gets for the tomato farm is actually a pretty good price. Okay? But it's market value. Okay? Now you might think, right, getting market value for the farm, and he got his investment back, so it's actually pretty good. He should be happy. But for the farmer, the farm represents his life's work, right? The history with his family, the memories, the love, and so on and so forth. So that, in some sense, the farm is priceless. Okay? So even if he sells the farm at a good, biographically objective price value, okay, he's still going to experience some loss from a biographically subjective point of view. Okay? Now, does this actually tell us about the rationality of emotions, called emotion? Not quite, right? Because you have other kinds of value claims that are not necessarily emotions, right? That are normative, okay? So we can't really say that this kind of rationality also fulfills core, okay? So, granted, this doesn't, there's a move missing, but that's okay. Okay, so, there's a slide missing, but that's okay. So there's, this can't really tell us about the rationality of emotions qua emotion, okay? So, what it does tell us is this, though. When we think about, let's say, something like loss, okay, in order for it to actually have evaluative content, okay, there has to be something that the content of that emotion gives us in terms of information, so that we can actually track values in the world and relate them to our well-being, okay? I suggest that this is basically what fulfills core, okay? So, what we have basically is the emotions as superordinate inference rules, okay? So, emotions as superordinate inference rules, there's like these category distinctions that I make, and this is because there's like emotion as the genus emotion, and we can call those, there's superordinate inference rule that is attached to that or associated with that. Or we can even talk about the type level, so anger, joy, these kinds of discrete emotions in having superordinate inference rules being associated with them, okay? But basically, the general idea is this: it's the intentional content of the emotion, okay, that fills in what emotions are as superordinate inference rules, okay? So I argue in some other work that basically this is a fundamental principle of emotion, that we need to actually attend to the intentional content of emotions, okay? And it is this intentional content that actually gives us the rationality of emotion qua emotion, okay? It's in not response to, but it's in accordance with the intentional content of emotions that we can even say that an emotion is appropriate, inappropriate, rational, irrational. But this intentional content also identifies a specific emotion type, like anger, joy, so on and so forth, as the type that they are, okay? From a larger view, it actually tells us what emotions are that is distinct from any other kinds of, if you want to say, mental state or physiological hybrid state, or so on experience. Okay? And that in general is what I call FIT. It's the fundamental, or actually it's FICE, so it's fundamental intentionality of emotions. And that's basically the idea that emotions in general, okay, are about aspects of the world and our well-being. Okay? That's what basically emotions are. Okay? Okay. So basically with that, okay, we have number one, right? So emotions are origins of their own rationality, given their intentionality. And emotions are arbiters of their own rationality. It's because of the rationality, or sorry, the intentionality of emotion that we can actually determine whether or not any kind of, we'll say, token emotional experience can be rational or irrational, because there is a intentionality that we're judging that token experience against. Okay? Okay, so we take the king, right? I fulfilled core, captured the king, and these are, let's see, the idea that emotions are basically subordinate inference rules is actually consistent with many, many views of emotion. Okay, so we can talk about basic emotion theories, appraisal theories, psychological constructivist theories, and even evolutionary psychological theories and theories in neuroscience. Okay, it actually covers a broad spectrum of theories, right? Even those that see themselves as being in opposition with each other. Okay, and this has to be the case, for me at least. Why? Because this is, I'm positing, as a fundamental principle of emotion research. Okay? If you're going to give me a theory of emotion, you got to make sense of the intentionality of emotions, or it's not about emotions. Okay? Okay. So, implications. Okay? Basically, what I think we can get out of my argument is that emotions are superordinate inference rules, and as such can be understood as ways of sense-making. Okay? And I refer to this as the fundamental epistemic principle, okay, of emotion. And as ways of sense-making, basically it provides us a way of understanding the role of the physical in accounts of knowledge. Okay? And that's if you take the kind of perceptual, if you want, embodied, cognitive kind of approach to emotion. Because remember, what fulfills core, the intentionality, is actually fundamental to all theories of emotion. Okay? And then we can also understand non-human animals, human infants, and some people with disabilities who might be typically thought of as otherwise to be rational, to be irrational. Wait. Some people with disabilities who might be typically thought of as otherwise to be rational and bearers of knowledge. Okay? So there was a talk here about autism, right? And there was concerns, and there's some researchers that suggest, well, they have emotional deficits and so on and so forth. Well, there's a question of whether or not, right, they actually do have emotional deficits, and whether or not the emotions that they do have, okay, can actually give them knowledge about the world. Okay? Babies and infants and so on as well. And then also, this might provide a way of adjudicating the epistemological debate between reliabilists and evidentialists. Okay, so I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with the debate between evidentialism and reliabilism in epistemology, but basically, it's, to put it very succinctly, it's this idea of like, can babies know? Right? The evidentialists want to say, no, they can't know. Why? Because they can't give evidence for why they know. Right? They can't provide the evidence or express the evidence that they have for why they know. However, reliabilists suggest, no, wait, they have a reliable system though. Okay? Typically it's put in terms of like perceptual systems. Okay? So we can at least say that they know certain things through this reliable system, and they don't have to know that they know. Okay? Well, emotions then might be similar to perceptual systems. Okay? Where they can know through their emotions, okay, but they don't have to know that they know. Okay? And I think that's it, and I have, like, my references.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. We have 12 minutes for the discussion. 12 minutes. Okay, so, Cecilia, you have 12 minutes. Thank you very much. So, I think we have 12 minutes. So,
sort of hinted at a definition. Emotions are somehow about our well-being and the world. Now, and what some aspects of the world related with our
It's
well-being.
yeah.
Okay.
So emotions relate this to the content or intentionality. Relate aspects of the world to our well-being
Okay.
in general.
Okay.
Like general.
Okay. But if intentionality is a relation between a subject and an object, I mean the subjects anyway are involved. You're right. You agree. Okay. But then let me propose an example: sacrificing one's life for love of a friend, love of I don't know one's country or whatever. There's a deep emotion inducing you to completely give up your well-being and life. And you do act with an emotion as a reason for your action. So how would you explain that?
Okay, so I think I'm going to have to ask you a couple questions first, right? Number one, what emotion exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about sacrifice as an emotion? Because I'm not quite sure if sacrifice is emotion.
No.
Or are you talking about love?
Love.
Okay, so I actually don't think love is an emotion, right? So I actually think love is a meta emotion.
Right.
And I'm actually working on this. If any of you are in New York, I'm part of a conference for the towards the Unified Science of Love conference. It's like a one-day conference in New York, and I will present my view there. But basically, the way that I understand love is it's a relation. And it is a meta relation that basically organizes our emotional responses in a certain way, right? So when we love someone, we actually experience all sorts of different emotions because we love them, right? We can be jealous, we can be angry, we can be fearful, and we can want to sacrifice, we can do many things, right? And what is it, right, that makes us do these things? Well, it's the relation of love, right? And I can't really define it necessarily. I can give you some components of it, maybe to capture exactly what might, not exactly, but certain things that might be involved in prototypical cases of love and things like that. But I can only point to it, right? And triangulate in terms of we kind of all know what love is, right? It's the thing that makes us do all these crazy things, but also all these really great things, right? Towards specific people or specific group or so on. Okay? So yeah, does that help?
Just okay, later on. Thank you.
I'm just trying to get a bit of clarification. Did you initially present Rorty and Prince as your opponents?
Yeah. So they think that emotions cannot be rational qua emotion.
I'm not sure that they're objecting to what you're asserting.
Yeah.
So-
Well, they are and they're not, right? So, and this is the wording that Jesse uses, right? Strictly speaking, he thinks, right, emotions are irrational. He doesn't think that it's possible for emotions to be rational. And the reason, like I said, is because of the way he kind of thinks about the emotion system in relation to, I think, cognition. So he puts the appraisal process in the initiation pathway, which is not part of the emotion system, which is what forces him basically into a position that says emotions, strictly speaking, are not rational.
So let me I just wanted to understand a little bit about your position.
Uh-huh.
So I think that many theorists, as you just read, many theorists that are working on the emotions, do provide some evaluative.
I agree. Yep. And I actually use their work, right, in order to derive my intentionality principle.
Okay. So I'm just trying to understand
And he does this through this kind of way in which our physiological stuff is related to the world such that the physiological feelings can actually have or contain intentional content, right? And the way in which, or the kind of intentional content that is contained in both theories is some type of relation between things in the world and the subject's well-being, okay? So that's the general principle, the fundamental principle of intentionality for emotions in general, okay? And then we can get more discrete in terms of talking about, well, what about anger? What about fear? What about joy? So on and so forth, okay? And, some of these things are kind of, I think, agreed upon by many researchers in terms of, like, what is the intentional content of fear? Well, it's something like whatever is out there that is causing the fear is dangerous, okay? So this, I think, everybody could kind of, like, reach a consensus on. However, there might be some questions as to things like shame, right? What is the intentional content of shame? And I'm actually working on a volume on shame for Roman and Littlefield. And I have a view that's somewhat different from the standard account, which is basically this account that when we experience shame, we basically have a global negative self-assessment. That's what, like, the standard account is. But there are a lot of opposing views as well to the standard account. So some things, right, in terms of some discrete emotions, we're still working on as emotion theorists in terms of trying to identify what the intentional content is. I am, however, a realist, right? I think that there are real objective facts about what the intentional content is of discrete emotions, okay? But I think that we really need to be careful about, as researchers, proposing that a specific hypothesis for the intentional content is the right one, okay? And this is like other work that I'm doing in the shame poly. So yeah, does that help? Okay.
Sandy?
So, just a very short question on this claim about emotions being superordinate inference rules. So, I'm trying to get at the idea of why they should be origins and arbiters of their own rationality.
Because, so number one, they are what give us what emotions are, right? So they define, so for example, you take the intentional content of, let's say, joy, okay? And that intentional content tells us what joy is, okay? It's about the experience of joy itself. It tells us, it defines that experience, okay? So in this sense, right, they're because they set the norm, okay, for what experiences of joy should be. When it backfires, it tells us, this is an irrational experience of joy. So they set their arbiters of their rationality as well.
Can I just try to explain what I have a problem with? So, in the evolutionary context, as I understand, let us say, like Osmalis and Tubi might think about. So, the rationality of the emotions would be determined by the way they improve our fitness, right? Or
Yeah, so
improve
coming
our
from the
well-
evolutionary.
So I'm not sure that the emotions themselves can determine, again, how well they work, how rational they work. So, yeah, okay. So I think there is an external standard to the rationality, which is supposed to be provided by the evolutionary.
Yeah, but the question is whether or not that external standard that you're thinking of is actually captured by any of the previous three senses of rationality that I discussed, which are technically speaking not about the rationality of emotion qua motion, right? So it might be that you're thinking about a way in which emotions can be rational, but not necessarily qua emotion.
Last question, Elliot.
I don't know whether this is a point of detail or not, but you say that when your definition of core is blah blah blah, there's a normative standard given by what emotions are or what an emotion type is. Now it seems to me that unless you say given by what emotions and only emotions are, then some of the other modes of rationality also satisfy core.
Yeah, so I think that is, so I was kind of thinking that I didn't need to make that kind of precise language, but I meant that. So yeah, I could put that in. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I mean,